a Friday night at a college bar, a 19-year-old girl who just wanted a ride home, and a sequence of events that would shock an entire nation, including a moment inside a courtroom where a defense team handed prosecutors the most damning evidence in the case that would come back to bite them. This case triggered new legislation in the state of Louisiana and produced one of the most remarkable courtroom backfires I have ever come across. With that said, settle in. Let us know where you're watching from, like and subscribe if you haven't yet, and let's journey. This is the case of Madison Brooks.
LSU student Madison Brooks, the Covington native who was hit and killed by a car in Baton Rouge. Police say she was sexually assaulted before her death, and 4 suspects face rape-related charges. And as Andres Fuentes reports, the Brooks family attorney says recent comments by their lawyers are shameful.
To understand this case fully, let's take a tour of the city. Baton Rouge, Louisiana, the state capital. Population around 230,000. A city shaped by Southern heat, Catholic tradition, and something that functions almost like a shared religion: LSU football. Louisiana State University is not just a campus here, it is the pulse of the entire city. On a home game Saturday, Tiger Stadium, one of the loudest venues in all of American college sport, pulls in over 100,000 people. The streets flood purple and gold. Businesses close early. Families drive in from hours away. The Tigers aren't just a team here, they are an identity. Just south of LSU's campus sits Tigerland, a cluster of bars and late-night venues centered around Bob Pettit Boulevard in East Baton Rouge. And for decades, it has been the place where LSU students go to unwind. Thursday nights, Friday nights, Saturday nights. Loud music, cheap drinks, and crowds of people who are young and largely unsupervised in the ways that matter. One of the most prominent venues on that strip was Reggie's Bar at 1176 Bob Pettit Boulevard. Open late, always busy. But Reggie's also had a history that, in hindsight, nobody took seriously enough. In 2014, a man was charged with attempted first-degree murder after a 20-year-old and 23-year-old were shot behind the bar. Before that, a woman was allegedly raped in its parking lot. A man had pointed a loaded gun at patrons inside. Reggie's had form, real, documented, undeniable form, and not enough was done about it. And it's into this world, this loud, spirited, football-loving city, that we meet Madison Brooks. Madison Kennedy Brooks was 19 years old, a resident of Covington, Louisiana, a tight-knit community on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain, just across from New Orleans. She was someone who had already built a life full of things she loved before she even got to university. A 2021 graduate of St. Scholastica Academy, a private Catholic school in Covington, Madison was an honor roll student. She was a cheerleader, a member of the Spirit Club, the Fellowship of Christian Athletes, and Doves for Life. She was not drifting through high school. She was present in it, engaged with it, building something. By the time she arrived at LSU, she had recently been accepted into the Manship School of Mass Communication, one of the most respected journalism and communications programs in the American South. She had a direction, a plan, a future she was actively building. She was a sophomore, a member of LSU's Alpha Phi sorority, a community she had planted herself firmly into, made friendships through, and built her social life around. Her friends described her as having a vibrant personality and an infectious laugh. She was always there for everyone, said her friend Haley Waterhouse. She was just someone you could always go to when you needed her. Her sorority sisters described her as bubbly, loving, and selfless, someone who left an indelible mark on everyone she met. Her mother, Ashley Boustert, was her best friend. That's not a throwaway line. The people who knew them said it clearly and repeatedly. Ashley was the person Madison called, the person she told things to, the person who understood her. That relationship, and what Ashley did with her grief in the months that followed, becomes one of the most powerful threads in the rest of this story. Her grandfather, Kurt LeBlanc, would later write in a public tribute, "She was pure joy and light. She made us so very proud." There is also one small detail worth noting, and I mention it not to cast any shadow on Madison, but because it becomes relevant as we trace how that evening unfolded. At some point before her death, Madison had briefly worked at Reggie's bar as a door girl. She was let go in July 2022 following an altercation with another employee. So when she walked through those doors on the evening of January 14th, 2023, this wasn't a place she was walking into blind. She knew it. She had worked there. In her mind, it was probably familiar ground. She had no reason to believe it would be the last night of her life. On Saturday, January 14th, 2023, Madison arrives at Reggie's bar on Bob Pettit Boulevard at around 10 p.m., captured on the bar's own surveillance system, later reviewed by investigators. It is a normal weekend night in Tigerland. Busy, loud, exactly what you would expect. Over the next several hours, Madison drank. And at some point during that evening, the situation moved well past what any responsible establishment should have allowed to continue. The bar kept serving her. Staff saw what was happening. Other patrons saw it too. And nobody intervened. At around 1 a.m., bar footage shows Madison falling over several times, stumbling and struggling to stand. She needs help getting back to her feet. The camera captures her in front of at least one of the men who will later be charged with raping her. And it is here, at around 2 a.m., 4 hours after she walked in, that Madison's path collides with 4 men who had been watching all of this and made a decision. By 2 a.m., Madison Brooks was barely standing, and those 4 men decided that what came next was an opportunity. Their names are Kyvon DeAndre Washington, 18 years old, Desmond Carter, 17 years old, Kazan John Carver, 18 years old, and Everett Lee, 28 years old, Washington's uncle, and the only person in that group who was legally a full adult. Authorities allege that Washington and Carter raped Brooks in the back of Carver's car after she asked for a ride home from Reggie's bar. Carver was behind the wheel. Lee was in the passenger seat. None of them had met Madison before that night. Carver confirmed this himself to investigators. They had been drinking at the bar themselves, and according to Carver's own account to police, before the group left, Madison approached them and asked for a ride home. He also said, in the same breath, that she was very unstable on her feet, was not able to keep her balance, and was unable to speak clearly without slurring her words. So right there, right at that moment, they had a choice. A visibly intoxicated 19-year-old who didn't know them was asking for a ride home. The decent, obvious human thing to do was to put her in that car, take her home, and make sure she got inside safely. Or call someone for her. Or simply not get involved at all. Instead, they made a different choice entirely. At approximately 2 a.m., surveillance cameras outside Reggie's bar captured Madison leaving with all 4 men and getting into Carver's car. The group drove to a parking lot. That is where Washington and Carter are accused of raping Madison in the back seat of Carver's vehicle. Carver and Lee sat in the front seats throughout. What Carver told investigators about what happened next is worth going through carefully, because his own words became some of the most devastating evidence in this entire case. He told police that Washington and Carter asked Madison if she wanted to have sex. He said Washington asked her numerous times whether she wanted to proceed, and that she consented. He told investigators she gave verbal consent. But then, in the same breath, he described the state she was in when they left that bar. That she was very unstable on her feet, that she was unable to keep her balance, that she was unable to speak clearly without slurring her words. And when investigators asked him directly, "Did you believe she was too impaired to consent?" he said, "I guess." The man in the front seat of that car, the driver, watched all of this happen, knew exactly what state Madison was in, and the most he could offer was, "I guess." Everett Lee, 28 years old, the oldest person in that vehicle, Washington's own uncle, confirmed to investigators he was in the passenger seat throughout. After that, he declined to say anything further. Washington denied everything. The moment detectives asked him to provide a DNA swab, he requested an attorney and ended the interview. And one of the suspects filmed what was happening inside that car on his phone. That footage, and the decision to record it, would become one of the most devastating pieces of evidence in the entire case. We'll get to exactly what happened when that video was played in court, because the story behind it is something else entirely. But right now, we need to stay in that car, because what happened next is the part that no amount of legal argument can reframe. Madison was barely conscious. Her BAC would later be confirmed at .319, nearly 4 times the legal driving limit in Louisiana. At that level, according to University of Notre Dame research, the effects include alcohol poisoning and loss of consciousness. She was not capable of consenting. Every single person in that car knew it, and not one of them did anything to stop it. At approximately 3 a.m., roughly 50 minutes after they drove away from Reggie's, the group dropped Madison off near the Pelican Lake subdivision off Burbank Drive in East Baton Rouge, a busy 4-lane highway in East Baton Rouge, poorly lit, no shoulder to stand on, and not a road you would leave anyone on under any circumstances, let alone at 3 a.m. in a state of severe intoxication. The defense would later argue that Madison got out of the car voluntarily after an argument, that she said she was going to Uber home and exited on her own terms. We will deal with that argument in detail shortly, and you can make of it what you will. What is not in dispute by anyone on any side of this case is what happened next. She was alone. She was drunk. She was on a 4-lane road with no pavement and almost no lighting. And the car that left her there just drove away. Madison stumbled into the middle of Burbank Drive, where she was hit by an oncoming car. The driver, who was not impaired, stayed at the scene immediately and called 911. They were never charged with any offense. Bo Adams, 21, was on his way home after a shift bartending with his friend Catherine DeVillier, also 21, when they saw a truck stopped on the roadway ahead of them. They initially thought the driver had hit a deer. They pulled over to help. Once Adams got out of the car, he realized it was a girl. She wasn't responsive. He got down on his knees beside her on that road, and he didn't leave. He performed CPR, something he had learned in 8th grade, treating Madison for the next 10 to 15 minutes until emergency personnel arrived. Meanwhile, DeVillier dodged traffic across the highway to find Madison's belongings. She found her purse on the other side of the road. Emergency services arrived. Madison was rushed to hospital. She died from multiple traumatic injuries. After medical personnel took Madison away, Bo and Catherine felt like they weren't done. DeVillier, who had lost her own mother in a car accident, knew the pain that Madison's family would be feeling. So she tracked Ashley Boustert down on social media, just to let her know that her daughter hadn't been alone. They found out which hospital Madison had been taken to and were there by around 6 a.m., staying until they got answers. Madison's heart and kidneys were donated. Somewhere, people are alive because of her. Ashley Boustert would later say that Bo and Catherine's actions allowed her family to say a final goodbye and preserve Madison's organs for donation. The two of them got matching tattoos, black angel wings, in Madison's memory. Ashley said it gives her comfort and peace that Bo and Catherine were there, that the last faces her daughter saw were not her attackers. They were two strangers who pulled over on a dark highway and refused to drive away. In a story full of people who did nothing, those two did everything they could. So, January 15th, 2023. In the immediate hours after Madison was taken to hospital, very few details about the circumstances of her death were made public. What most people heard first was the surface version. A young woman, struck by a car on Burbank Drive in the early hours of the morning. A tragic accident on a dark road. That was the version that lasted about 8 days. Because behind the scenes, investigators were already looking at something that told a very different story. Medical and toxicology reports issued by the East Baton Rouge Parish Coroner's Office found that Madison had injuries consistent with sexual assault, and that her blood alcohol content was .319, nearly 4 times the legal limit to drive in Louisiana. She also tested positive for tetrahydrocannabinol. Those findings changed everything. This was no longer just a traffic investigation. With the medical records in hand, detectives turned to the surveillance cameras, not just Reggie's bar, but the businesses surrounding it. Detective Lieutenant Tarek Mokhdoff used security cameras from nearby businesses to track Carver's car from the Tigerland bar, building a minute-by-minute picture of exactly where that vehicle went and when. The footage showed Madison and the 4 suspects leaving the bar at 1:49 a.m. and getting into the car at 1:54 a.m. It showed exactly who left with her. It showed exactly what state she was in when she did. From there, identifying the 4 suspects did not take long. On January 21st and 22nd, investigators visited them at their homes. On January 23rd, just 8 days after Madison died, all 4 turned themselves in to the East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office. The charges were precise and deliberate. Washington and Carter were charged with 3rd-degree rape. Under Louisiana law, that charge applies when a victim is incapable of resisting or understanding the nature of the act by reason of a stupor or abnormal condition of mind produced by an intoxicating agent, and the offender knew or should have known of the victim's incapacity. Play that back. Knew or should have known. Carver had already told police, in his own words, exactly what condition Madison was in. There was no ambiguity about what anyone in that car knew. Carver and Lee were charged with principal to 3rd-degree rape, present, aware, and complicit through inaction. Carter, the 17-year-old, was booked into juvenile detention. The 3 adult suspects were booked into the parish prison. Bond was set the following day. Carver posted $50,000 and was released. Lee posted $75,000 and was released. Washington, facing the most serious charges, had bond set at $150,000 and initially remained in jail. The conditions for those released were strict: house arrest, ankle monitors, no social media posts about the case, and absolutely no contact with Madison's family. The judge was not inclined to be lenient about any of it. The defense teams came out immediately and aggressively. Ron Haley, attorney for Washington, went straight to the cameras. Absolutely not a rape. This is a tragedy, definitely not a crime. He argued that Madison was intoxicated, yes, but not to the point where she was legally incapable of consent. Carver's attorney, Joe Long, was equally confident. When all the evidence is known, everyone will see this was not a crime. Haley went further. He claimed Madison had exited the vehicle voluntarily, that after an argument in the car, she told the men she was getting an Uber and got out on her own terms, that she made a choice, that nobody left her anywhere. And then, in a decision that I still find genuinely staggering, Haley released a video to the public. Footage filmed inside the car by one of the suspects, apparently confident it would support his client's position. In the footage, Madison slurs her words. She says, "I'm sorry that I offended you that bad." She asks to get out of the car. She says she'll Uber home on her own. The defense presented this as proof. She was conscious, communicating, making her own decisions. See? She wasn't incapacitated. She was talking. At the bond hearing, 19th Judicial District Judge Brad Myers said he had personally viewed the footage. He had also reviewed the surveillance footage from Reggie's bar, footage already captured in this case, showing Madison's state in the hours before she left. He reviewed it all, and then he gave his assessment. He said the video showed the suspects, callously, laughing at Madison as she slurred her words, not concerned, not trying to help her. laughing. And his conclusion, stated plainly on the record, in open court: "The evidence to me is clear." The video that Ron Haley released, the one his team believed would demonstrate their client's innocence, had, in the judge's own words, done the opposite. It had reinforced their disregard for Madison's life and their violation of her rights. They handed that footage over themselves, and a judge watched it and said it proved exactly what they didn't want it to prove. There is really no other word for that but extraordinary. Now, here is where this case takes a turn that demands you stop and sit with it for a moment. On January 27th, just 4 days after his arrest in the Brooks case, and 1 day after he had posted his $150,000 bond and walked out of jail, Kyvon Washington was arrested again. Arrest documents revealed Washington had been accused of assaulting a 12-year-old girl at a pool party in Walker, Louisiana in May 2020, when Washington was 16 and the girl was 12. When she reported the rape in March 2021, the victim told police she and several other young people had been swimming at an apartment complex when Washington followed her to a room, pulled a towel off her, threw her on a bed, covered her mouth, and raped her. A report was filed with Walker Police Department on March 10, 2021, against Washington as the named suspect. But the victim's mother later said she felt Walker police had simply ignored her daughter's case. "I just felt like she was never going to get justice," she said. No charges were filed. The case went cold. Then Madison Brooks died, and everything reopened. A third allegation then emerged in mid-February, this time an incident from October 2022 in the same area of East Baton Rouge. That victim reported the assault on January 25th, the day after Washington's arrest in the Brooks case. Like Madison, she had been drinking at Reggie's bar. Like Madison, more than one man was involved. A prosecutor reviewing the pattern said it plainly. There are a lot of similarities that suggest a MO. It was the same bar, more than one man was involved, the use of alcohol, and being separated from friends. It suggests he preys on vulnerable women. A man with a rape allegation involving a child on file with police since 2021. A case that went cold. A second victim who came forward only because his name was finally in the news. The question of whether better action in 2021 could have prevented what happened to Madison Brooks on January 15th, 2023. There is no comfortable answer to that. But it is absolutely a question worth sitting with. So, by late February 2023, the legal picture had escalated significantly, and it has continued to evolve in the years since. On February 22nd, Desmond Carter was indicted by a grand jury on first-degree rape, Louisiana's most severe sexual assault charge, as well as third-degree rape. He would now be tried as an adult. First-degree rape in Louisiana carries a mandatory sentence of life in prison without parole. Carver and Washington were also subsequently indicted on first-degree and third-degree rape charges. Carver additionally faces a charge of video voyeurism, a direct consequence of the phone footage filmed inside the car. The same footage his own defense attorney released to the public. All three are being tried separately. Now here is where I need to be straight with you, sidekicks, because this case is very much still moving through the courts. As of the time of filming, Carver's trial has been tentatively set for August 2026, after a series of significant legal complications. A judge was removed from Carver's case after text messages from Carver to his father emerged, in which he wrote that the judge knows to help us, an extraordinary development that speaks to the turbulence surrounding this entire case. Carter's trial is currently scheduled for August 17th, 2026. Washington's case also remains unresolved. 2 years on from Madison's death, not a single one of these men has faced a jury. That is where things stand. I will link the latest updates in the description below. Please check there for the most current information, because this story is not finished yet. As for Everett Lee, Washington's uncle, the 28-year-old who sat in that passenger seat and said nothing. His case has followed a different legal track from the other three. He was charged as a principal to rape rather than as a direct perpetrator. For the most current update on where his case stands, I'll link the latest reporting in the description below. But make no mistake, his presence in that car, his silence, and his inaction are part of this story. They always will be. While the criminal cases made their slow way through the courts, there was one outcome in this case that arrived more swiftly and more definitively. On January 24th, the Louisiana Office of Alcohol and Tobacco Control issued an emergency suspension of Reggie's Bar's liquor license, citing the seriousness of the allegations and the potential threat to public safety. LSU President William Tate IV was unambiguous. He demanded answers. He called a meeting with local business owners and stated publicly, "We will work openly against any business that doesn't join us in efforts toward creating a safer environment for our students. Enough is enough." Then, on April 27, 2023, came the final ruling. The ATC Commissioner Ernest Legier confirmed that Reggie's Bar's alcohol license had been permanently revoked. The bar would not reopen. Owner Darren Adams was permanently banned from managing, owning, or operating any establishment that serves alcohol anywhere in Louisiana. The bar was also fined $15,000. Carrie Miller, the attorney for Madison's mother Ashley, said, "We are very pleased that the ATC has imposed the death penalty on Reggie's. Permanent revocation of a liquor license is the most egregious regulatory enforcement action that can be taken, and it is exactly appropriate in this circumstance. They are responsible for Madison Brooks' death." ATC Commissioner Legier was equally direct. "The business was before us on many violations, which ultimately led to a tragic set of circumstances. We felt like if it wasn't for the irresponsible behavior on the part of this bar, it could have saved the life of Ms. Brooks. A $15,000 fine, a closed bar, a permanent ban, for a 19-year-old girl who walked in and never made it home. Make of that what you will, but the consequences of Madison's death reached further than one bar on one street." In the months following Madison's death, Senator Beth Mizell introduced Senate Bill 194, the CARDM Act, standing for Create Alcohol Responsibility and Deterrence, which would prohibit anyone under the age of 21 from entering a bar in Louisiana, bringing the state in line with the rest of the United States. The bill would also increase fines for businesses caught serving underage customers, with penalties ranging from $1,000 to $15,000, depending on the number of violations. The legislation has continued to evolve. A newer proposal, directly called the Madison Brooks Law, has since been introduced, this time targeting a specific vulnerability exposed by her case: the use of fake or borrowed IDs to gain entry to bars. The bill would require biometric age verification at bar entrances, a live facial match linked to a verified credential, making it significantly harder to enter a licensed premises with someone else's identification. On February 3, 2023, 19 days after Madison died, her family laid her to rest at St. Peter Catholic Church in Covington, Louisiana, the town she grew up in, the community that shaped her. Mourners filled the church dressed in pink, her favorite color. Outside, people who had never met Madison stood in the cold because they felt they knew her, because her story had reached that far. Her mother Ashley's tribute said everything that needed to be said. "My beautiful angel, one and only daughter, and best friend that was taken way too soon. I promise to honor you, your legacy, and will do everything in my power to ensure no other family has to endure the pain we have faced." Ashley has kept that promise every single day since. The Madison Brooks Foundation, which she built from grief and determination, works to protect college students, support those in financial need, and champion organ donation awareness. And somewhere out there, Bo Adams and Catherine DeVillier, Two strangers who chose to stop on a dark road are still part of Ashley's life. Because in a case full of people who looked away, they looked directly at Madison. And they stayed. This case is not one failure. It is a chain. A bar that kept serving a visibly intoxicated teenager for hours. Bystanders who watched and said nothing. A system that had a rape allegation against one of these men sitting on file since 2021 and did nothing with it. And 4 individuals who made an active, conscious decision to leave a 19-year-old girl alone on a 4-lane highway at 3 a.m. Every single link in that chain had a chance to break it. Not one of them did. Madison Brooks did not have to die. That is the thing about this case that never stops being true, no matter how many times you go over it. She did not have to die. And I think the question this case demands isn't just, what did these 4 men do? It's, how many people had a chance to stop it and didn't? That's the harder question, but it's the right one. What I'd like to know from you is this. Do you believe Reggie's bar bears criminal responsibility for what happened that night, not just the men? Let me know in the comments below. I read as many as I possibly can. I'll see you very soon for the next one. But until that moment, look after yourselves, look after each other, and of course, stay curious.